It's time for the Chapter 49 podcast. It is, guess what? Friday the 13th. It is May 13th of 2022, and welcome to our podcast. We always are happy that you're with us. My name is Larry Lannan. I'm a volunteer, and I do volunteer activities with Chapter 49. We at Chapter 49 represent most IRS employees in the state of Indiana. And once again, we welcome Duncan Giles, our chapter president, who is with us once again. And Duncan, I'm trying to remember, is it your idea or mine to do this on Friday the 13th?
That would be mine. This was my call this time. Friday the 13th, I've not had many problems with. Saturday the 14th, I have had a fractured ankle and a fractured wrist on two different Saturday the 14th. So I'm staying in bed tomorrow.
Well, that was my next question. You are staying in bed tomorrow. We can't afford to have you off work that long. You just have too much. You got too much work to do as a chapter president. But anyway, the weather is great. We're in the 80s for the first time in 2022 here recently. Indianapolis getting a dose of summer early on in the season. We've had some cold and rainy May days, but this month, most of our days have been rather warm. The Indianapolis Motor Speedway is heating up. They have a road race coming up this weekend. Of course, the Big 500 is a couple of weeks away. That's what's going on around here. I'm sure things are active wherever you may be watching or listening. So, Duncan, let's get into our work today. And with the first thing we want to talk about, and I've seen this, even though I'm not really involved in tax anymore, I used to teach tax for Indiana University, and I ended that a couple of years ago. But, you just never can totally get away from tax. So once you're a tax guy, you just can't get it out of your blood. So every now and then I'll get these emails, or I do subscribe to a few newsletters that deal with tax. And all I've been reading about lately, and this is going to all the tax professionals all around the country, is that paper processing is way behind. And if you file, let's say, a 1040X paper return, you might as well go on vacation for several months. You're not going to hear about anything for several months. You can tell your client that. But we've talked about this so-called surge that's been going on, bringing people from one part of the service into paper processing. And there are some remote call sites that are involved in this. So what can you tell us about what's happening right now?
Yeah, the IRS is still struggling to hire, and actually they are getting a lot more hires. The problem is, of course, then retention, and we're having folks that are leaving very shortly after being hired. We're not having a good retention rate, which unfortunately I'm no surprises, not a lot of us. The latest idea is we are so far behind in 1040Xs, the corrected tax returns to amend your previous year's returns, that they have taken 4 of the larger call sites, and they're asking for volunteers who want to do the 1040X work remotely. They're going to be training them up for a couple weeks and then, letting them loose to do this through the rest of the basically the fiscal year. And again, it's one of those situations where, we do need to hit the 1040Xs. We need to get our paper inventory down. We need to get it all down, because this is only going to lower our level of service, what they call the LOS in the IRS, because we're nothing if we're not having an acronym attached to something.
Well, yeah.
And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's just one of those things where it's almost like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. We're just plugging holes because we just seriously don't have enough bodies and can't get enough trained bodies to stay to do this type of work.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned level of service. That was something I remember from my toll-free days. And I must say that level of service seems to be a low priority. That paper inventory seems to be the priority. And I can understand why, but don't you think some members of the public may be getting a bit frustrated when they cannot get their telephone calls answered? I mean, that's sort of been the way it's been for several years now, just to a lack of resources and people. But when you make it this much worse, it's like you're exactly right. This is a rearrangement of chairs or robbing Peter to pay Paul. And the service, I have to give them credit to some extent. They're doing the best they can with what they have available, but it's not easy to get everything done that needs to be done and meet these expectations that the public would have for us.
Yeah, this is not a problem that happened overnight, and it's not going to be solved overnight. And they're, like you said, they're trying to do their best. We may not agree with their methods and the way they're going about this. Like, we would have liked to have people who are included in the first surge that were involuntarily told you have to go on the phones to be able to do this 1040X work, but they're not allowed to. We would have liked to have more call sites open to this, because call sites have been screaming to do this type of work forever, but it's only open to 4 large call sites. And again, it's a balancing act. I get that, totally understand it. But we're not doing anybody any justice with the way that things are going now. And I can't tell you the jobs that the folks in the service centers and the folks in the tax and the folks that are in TAS and accounts management have, the tremendous pressures that they're dealing with people who are so frustrated because they can't get anybody on the phone. They can't get an answer to their questions. They can't figure out what's going on with their paper inventory, whether it's a correspondence or whether it's an amended return, something like that. It's tremendously frustrating to everyone, including the folks who are doing yeoman's work every single day to try and get this solved. But it's going to take years, literally, to get this fixed.
Well, and I think one question that may come up in the minds of people, let's say, who work in the Indianapolis call center, as you mentioned, it is not one of the larger call centers. Therefore, there's no 1040X work coming to Indianapolis. Do you think if things continue the way they are, that could change?
Anything is possible. It's possible I might be named Mr. Universe this year, but I'm not counting on that. And I'm not counting on the work expanding outside of the 4 call sites that they've already named. We asked that question during the briefing, and they were pretty adamant that this was the way that they were going to go, because of the fact that it has to do with what types of calls each site answers, how many people are in that particular site, and how long it takes them to train them up to do this type of work.
Well, whenever you use the Mr. Universe example, I know there's not much of a chance. So
Exactly.
Well, I think we got the picture on that one. I'm just curious about one thing, and maybe you don't know the answer, but I from a technical point of view, I was wondering how this would happen. Let's say you're working at one of these large centers, but you don't have the paper there. Are they going to ship the paper to these people, or are they going to scan it and they're going to do it? They're going to watch the scanned copy. I'm just curious. Do you have any word on how that's going to work?
Apparently, what we've been told is it will be scanned copies. Okay. Now, who are going to be the bodies that are going to scan these in? You got me. Everybody's already working to capacity.
That takes time and effort to do that. Yes, I agree.
Exactly. But whatever works, they seem to have a plan, and God bless them. So there've been a lot of people who've had a lot of plans over the decades and hundreds of years, and man plans, God laughs. And I hope that's not the case this time, but I think it might be.
All right. So that's the way it looks for now. Let's move on to another subject. And this is a subject we all have been talking about for some time, but it is here now. We are recording this, as I said, on Friday the 13th. I believe the date that we're looking at now is May the 16th for the Thrift Savings Plan. The Thrift Savings Plan, as I understand it, they're going to shut down your ability to get information on your account, which means, like, if you've used the internet to log in and look at your account, starting on May 16th for a period of time, I think it's going to be a couple of weeks, I'll let you get into that, you'll not have the access to your account information. Now, TSP has made it very clear that they will still make contributions, and if you've got distributions set up, they will come out they may not come out exactly at the same time if they're timed to come out every month, But the bottom line is, even though your access to your account is shut down, behind the scenes, all that activity will happen. And the reason the shutdown is happening is to enhance all of the activities that you can do. And there'll be a phone app, which will be a new thing, and there'll be some enhancement of the system you use to get in, let's say on the internet, if you're using the web to get into the TSP. So, what will you tell people as to what to expect with this TSP shutdown looming now?
It's almost like Kevin Bacon in the end of Animal House. Remain calm, all is well. While he's getting run over. That's one of those things where, the TSP has been very good about getting out the information. National NTU has sent out information to members. It's just one of those things that, because of the massive changes that the TSP is doing with the brand new options on the mutual funds and things of that nature, the phone app that you mentioned, instead of trying to do it piecemeal, they're saying, okay, we're just going to shut it down for a couple of weeks. We're still going to be doing what we need to do. But if you want to do anything new, you want to change your contribution, change your allocation, change beneficiaries, start getting money out, things of that nature, you're going to have to hold off until sometime around the first week in June. They're saying it'll be the end of the first week in June, but they've also said they're giving themselves a little, it could be earlier. They just want to make sure that everybody is planning for worst case scenario.
And as I've said before, the thrift savings plan is one of the great success stories. We've had a lot of things happen in government that maybe did not work out the way we had hoped. Well, the thrift savings plan is one of the great stories of how to do things the right way. And it's been a very, very effective and efficient way to save for retirement. So I think when something is new, it has everybody concerned. So the basic thing is, if you try to log in the next 3 weeks, you may not be able to get into the account, but everything is happening behind the scenes as it's supposed to. And as Duncan said, if you're trying to get something done, a change done, something like that, you're going to have to wait a little bit to get that done. So basically, just be aware that this is happening, and we will let you know on this podcast. And by the way, we have our Facebook page, NTEU Chapter 49 Indiana. We've already migrated it to a new place on the internet due to some changes in Facebook, but that should all be taken care of now. And if you have trouble getting into it, Duncan can send you a link, or I think that's the only link left now. So if you just go to Facebook and look under NTEU Chapter 49 Indiana, you should be able to find it. We will have updates about the TSP and when it comes back up and what you need. We'll be looking for on that way of communicating. And I'm sure Duncan will also communicate with the membership through his email list and other ways. Anything you want to add about TSP before we move on?
Yeah, and National NTU will be on top of this as well, because they're very aware of how many people count on this and want to make changes a lot of times. So they're very on top of it, and will, I'm sure, be getting out information as soon as they hear it as well.
Moving on to something else, Duncan. And again, I think this is near and dear to your heart because you were so heavily involved in negotiating the revised national agreement that's been in place since October 1st of last year. In that contract language, there is a new program that's been set up. It's a child care subsidy. And not everybody would be eligible for it, but it's for lower income employees. And we have a number of those at the service to help out with childcare costs. And a lot of other agencies have done this very successfully. IRS saw this as a way to attract and retain employees. They were on board with this. They were willing to do this. We're all, from what you have told me, had no objection to it and wanted to bring it into the contract language. Well, it's there, but even though it's been in the contract since October 1st, we still do not have an IRS child care subsidy program. Why is that?
Yeah, this is one of those things. I like to call this the Ken Moffitt, our national director at NTU of negotiations, who came up with this, and everybody has agreed. It's a great plan. It's a great program. There, as you said, there are income limits. Everything was going smoothly. And then, as it always is in life, the devil is in the details. And, it's trying to find the right vendor, getting that vendor up and running. What we're hearing is, and we filed NTU had to file a national grievance over this just because we can't figure out why it's taking so long. To be honest with you, I'm betting the IRS can't figure out why it's taking the vendor so long. Aside from, I'm betting it's the famous two words that go with government contracts: low bid. You're getting what you're paying for right there. So what's happening is they're telling everybody who might qualify for this, save your receipts, save your information. This is going to be retroactive. Retroactive to when? How long do we have to wait? This is something that I know everybody is pounding the table for. And when I say that, I'm talking about management as well as national NTU and local chapters as well, because we want to get it set up for our members as soon as possible. But for whatever reason, it's not moving swiftly at all, or is it moving at all? We don't know. And so that's why we filed the national grievance to try and get this figured out so we can get this benefit that everyone agrees is a great thing to our members as soon as possible.
And Duncan, I think that people are curious about this. So tell us what you know, because as I understand it, you're very good about filling me in and putting me in the loop on these things. As I understand it, there was an award given, bids were taken, and the bid was awarded, the contract was awarded to a vendor. But as I understand it, and we don't want to name any names or disparage anybody, I'm not doing that at all. What I am saying is there seems to be an issue where the vendor is having trouble coming up with what they had promised to do. And I'm not saying anything. Things happen for a variety of reasons, but that appears to be the case. This kind of goes back to your lowest bidder comment. So what do we know about the details of what went wrong? Is there really very much we do know at this point?
No, there's unfortunately not very much. This company has said that they are doing it for other governmental agencies. How much the IRS check those references, have no idea how successful or whether there were any issues or not. Don't know. We have heard that it is a very small operation, and so I don't know if this is just too overwhelming for them. We don't know the details, and that's one of the reasons the national grievance was filed, so we can get the answers for employees who have been patiently, and I will say this, patiently waiting for this benefit that should have been shortly after October 1st starting to be implemented.
All right, so we'll keep an eye on that. As Duncan mentioned, there is a national grievance. And when you file a grievance, there is information that has to be provided. And that is, as Duncan mentioned, one reason the grievance was filed. The union wants to find out why this is not working out as the contract had laid out. So we will continue to update you on our various communication levels, including our weekly podcast. We'll try to bring up any new information we have once it's there. Something else has been happening, and I found it quite interesting. There are people working for the IRS that are getting W-2Cs, corrected W-2s. We don't see that happen often at the IRS, but these W-2Cs are for 2020. So what do we know? What's going on, and what should employees do, if anything, if one of these W-2Cs for 2020 is received from the service?
Yeah. And National NTU, if you get their emails, which you should sign up for if you're not, because they are full of great information, did send something out on this because the IRS has been absolutely silent, which, to be honest with you, infuriates me because there's no reason for that. This goes back to, and every employee and IRS employee is going to get one of these for the year 2020. It goes back to the Social Security holiday that we had. And basically what it is saying is it's an informational W-2C, basically showing now that the Social Security withholding that we were given a holiday for has been repaid. So you're getting these forms basically saying, okay, we just want you to know that. Is it going to cause you to file a new federal return? Absolutely not. Do not file another federal return. There may be some states or local communities that have the Social Security information that may want that information as part of your return. I don't know. I don't think that there are going to be very many states or localities, municipalities that want to do this. It's mostly an informational thing, and you want to keep a hold of this in case when you do get older and retire and start collecting Social Security, and that's closer to some of us than others, that in case Social Security doesn't have a record of it, you've got that W-2C to show, hey, look, this was repaid. We are paid in full, and I have paid my Social Security taxes. So it's basically an informational thing. Don't panic. Don't freak out.
Of course, I don't have to worry about getting older. I'm already there. So
I was not going to say anything about that. People who live in glass houses are not going to start throwing stones because they can be heavy.
Well, you're close to retirement age. I've been there for, well, I guess 11 years now almost. So no, it's retirement's a great thing. If you're ready for it and have prepared well for it, it's the greatest thing in the world. And I've seen a lot of my coworkers do. But something, Duncan, when you were talking about these W-2Cs, it brought me flashbacks, and it probably did for you as well. For the years you and I both worked in toll-free, we would get these questions from the people who had received W-2Cs, and you're trying to figure out and decipher what it means. In this case, we're deciphering what it means, and what it means for most people is not much or nothing.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, and as we all know, getting these forms, even very intelligent people can be confused by our stuff. My daughter just yesterday got a form from the IRS, and she was very, couldn't understand it, very panicked. And my daughter is one smart lady, let me tell you. She's like your daughters. All three of them are very, very sharp ladies, but because she'd never had experience with this type of thing, it was like reading a foreign language to her. Had her photograph the documents, sent them to me, took a look at them, realized that somewhere along the line, a company had made a mistake with because I don't think a not yet 30-year-old had gotten a retirement distribution. So a company had transposed a number. We caught it, sent her a proposed change, and now she's going to have to call the company and get it corrected. So it's not a huge thing. It wasn't a huge amount of tax, but it's something that, it's foreign to a lot of us. And even people that work for the IRS get these notices and can get confused if they're not used to dealing with it. So it's just one of those things that, when that's why I want to tell people, if it's not a big deal, relax, it's okay. And that's the big thing to hammer here on this 1099 or this W-2C.
Well, and the reason people freak out, I mean, people generally freak out. I just remember years ago, I think this goes back to the 1990s, early to mid 1990s, that the people at the IRS headquarters had this idea that, hey, we need to communicate with the public. We need to send people information. They need to know what we're working on this. They need to know about what we're doing. We need to continue to stay in contact with them. And in that time, that the technology was you mail everything. Then somebody finally asked the question, well, have we ever done any research about whether the public really wants all this information? Well, they went back and did some research and found out, in fact, the public did not want to hear from the IRS unless they absolutely had to. So the service was saying, we need to communicate with these people. The people are saying, leave us alone. If you have to send us a notice, fine. But if you're just sending us information, we freak out every time we see IRS on the return envelope. So sometimes it's just a matter of knowing what the public really wants.
Yeah, I remember 25 or so years ago, answering questions on the phone when people would call in and say, I got this letter from the IRS, asking, what does it say? I don't know. I'm afraid to open it. I can't tell you the number of times that I had that. I'm sure you had that. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, let's start from the beginning. Go ahead, get a letter opener, open that sucker up, start to read me what it says, because we spoke the language. We understood. Start to read me what it says. Okay, this is what it's saying. This is so I know what to look for.
Yeah, and it's just a matter of really understand what the public wants. They don't really want to hear from us, and I think that's still true. People just freak out when they get a letter from the IRS, and most of the time it's not anything serious, but you assume it is every time you receive one. So I think there were some lessons learned there. So bottom line is, if you receive this W-2C from 2020, it's unlikely you'd have to do anything. If you do, it's a local issue. You can check with the local people if you wish. But even I don't think in Indiana it makes any difference at all. But you need to, if you're from another state, just make sure you talk to your local officials if you have any questions about what they need to have from you. Anything else? Anything else on that, Duncan?
No, sir.
Well, you don't have to call me sir.
Sometimes I like to do that to try and throw you off.
Which you just did, as you can tell. One thing that I want to say, and I don't want to get into geeky type of labor relations things, and I'm not planning on doing that, but I do think that people who listen and to this podcast and watch it on video need to know that the people who are appointed to very key government boards, they are very influential in how your workplace may be set up. And if we have more employee-friendly people on boards and authorities that govern what happens to you in the workplace, this is a positive thing for you. And many of the appointees that President Biden have made have been held up because there's some people who just want to hold them up for political reasons. That's been pretty well documented by a number of journalists. But now things are starting to move. And there is a body called the Federal Labor Relations Authority, also, again, another acronym, FLRA. But this is a very key government body that makes very important rulings that can impact your workplace and what you are able to take advantage of as a federal employee, your benefits, and how your workplace is run. There's a new a person named Susan Grunman who has been appointed to that board and has just recently been confirmed by the Senate. It's been a very long, arduous process. But this is good news for federal employees to have someone who at least will listen to employees' cases, their side of the story when cases are brought before that authority. So maybe a word from you, Duncan, on just how important it is for these appointments to be made in a timely manner.
Yeah, it's extremely important because they hold great sway over how workplace conditions can go. If you have one that is too far one side or the other, and they decide to make case law, a ruling that become case law, and it has no basis in law or precedence, it throws everybody off because, okay, now you've got this thing that's an outlier out there that has never occurred before, but now we're stuck with it. And you don't want those types of things. I don't think either management or employees in the federal government want surprises. They want to know, it should be somewhat logical. And I think now with the makeup of the board that we have, we should start going back to getting more logical decisions based on precedents, based on previous case law, that sort of thing, which is how the FLRA has in the past and should operate, as opposed to what it was doing in the recent past.
And we won't get into that, but we do think that some of the new appointees will at least look at these in a different light and will at least consider what the employees and the employee unions have to say. And I think that's the good thing. Duncan, I just want to say there are probably people listening and watching this thinking, why have the two of us not been talking about the vaccine mandate? Well, there's a very clear reason why. There's nothing new to say. Correct?
Correct. Absolutely correct. So if nothing is happening right now, it's the status quo. We, of course, will bring you news on it whenever it happens, as soon as it happens. But right now, there's no change.
And we know it's an issue of concern, and the court decisions have come, and all this has happened. but it really hasn't all settled down to the point where we know what the next steps will be. Once we know, we will have it front and center. I just know that a lot of people think about these things, and it's not because we're ignoring it. We just have nothing new to say. What we've last said is exactly what everything is in place at the moment, so there'll be no changes, and that's the important thing to know. Speaking of changes, we have just gone past the phase one date for return to office. Everyone's supposed to be in the office by near the December, I'm sorry, near the end of June, not December, my goodness, no. June 27th for most people, because that's a Monday. So it looks like that's going to happen for everyone. The rules that were in before the evacuation order will kick in for everyone. But there are a number of people who have already started to return to the offices. So what do we know about how that's going or not going?
It's going okay. Have not heard a lot of loud screaming about it. There are certain people that have not been able to continue to telework mostly because of the Telework Act of 2010 that we touched on in previous podcasts about more than 41 hours of AWOL in a calendar year, and they've gotten suspensions or more over that. So it's that's thankfully been very few. There's the vast majority are still working, being able to work the expanded telework and won't have to return to the office. One thing I do want to touch on that I've said in a lot of meetings about return to office for folks who are new to telework. And you've got to have this understanding that depending upon space, if you are a frequent teleworker, you're teleworking more than 80 hours in a pay period, that you are not entitled to a desk. When you come in, you're entitled to, have one, of course, to sit down and do your work and all that, but your own personal assigned desk, you're not entitled to that legally, contractually, because of the fact that you're spending the vast majority of your time either in the field or at home on telework. So, I try and clear up the confusion on that as much as possible. The vast majority of the time, management has been very good where there is space available and no need to go into hoteling or desk sharing. They're not doing that, which is logical, which when logic prevails in the federal government, I always just, say a thank you and walk very quickly away because it's so rare. But it's one of those things that I just want to make sure that everybody understands that when we start having these mass hirings, if we ever, we're doing a lot of hiring, but I mean, the type of hiring that they've been talking about, if they get extra funds, and we're not going to be increasing a lot of space, that they are going to have you desk share. And so, you may have the desk on a Wednesday when you come in, and somebody else may have it on a Thursday, and somebody else may have it on Monday. So you just, have to be ready for that possible eventuality.
And our time is up. Anything you want to add as we close this podcast?
Yeah, the last thing I do want to talk about is actually I have two topics. Real quick, the folks in Ukraine, they're still out there just doing an unbelievable job in fighting for their country, and my heart goes out to them. And I just, hope everyone out there is giving their support to the country that's fighting for democracy and fighting for their lives right now. The second thing is, I know a lot of folks out there who've been doing a tremendous job from home. All the federal employees that I know of are doing a tremendous job from home and continue to do so. And I know there's anxiety from a lot of you about coming into the office even a couple of days a week or a couple of days a pay period, depending upon your situation. I understand that. I absolutely do. Social anxiety is real. Change can be very difficult, but it will be okay. We're here to help you. NTU is here to help you. The EAP line, where you can reach out to folks, talk to counselors about this, is a great resource to have. So don't feel you're alone. Don't feel that you just have to go through this. If you feel like it gets to be overwhelmed, talk to the EAP, talk to NTU representatives, talk to your managers, talk to whoever you need to talk to, and we'll try and help you through this for the best way possible for you to move forward.
And Duncan, just one comment to dovetail that. It's not just a federal employee thing. It's not just an IRS thing. This anxiety and this difficulty of dealing with all of this is nationwide, worldwide to some extent. And when COVID happened, we were forced to big changes quickly. We all had to adapt. Very difficult thing to do. So I would say, in my view, I agree with you. People working for the federal government, people working for IRS, we adapted. We got the work done. It wasn't easy. And now we're shifting the way we get the work done. That's another change we're going to have to manage. So don't feel like you're alone. Follow the advice Duncan has given you. And I think you will find that once you're back with your fellow workers, even if it's a couple of days of pay period, whatever amount of time it is, connect with your co-workers and try to make that work. I mean, working at home has its good point, but working in the office can also provide you some benefits as well. And as Duncan has said, there were efforts at the bargaining table to allow people to work at home all the time. For a lot of different legal reasons, it just wasn't going to work. So thank you, Duncan. Thank you very much. We made it another week, and hopefully we'll be back next week with another edition of the Chapter 49 podcast. As we have said many times before, we have both an audio and a video version of this podcast. So we appreciate all you watching and listening, and please be safe and be kind.